I am no other person. I could name some names here, but you know, I'm supposed to be at least one of 3 different people. I got to be one of them. I can't be myself. I've got to be one of those guys. But I'm neither one of them. I am Bob Joyce. I was born Bob Joyce, and I will die Bob Joyce.
Imagine sitting under blinding studio lights when one question suddenly challenges everything you've told the world. That's what happened when Bob Joyce was confronted about the theory linking him to Elvis Presley. Asked whether he truly believed he was Elvis, his response exposed something deeper than a conspiracy. It revealed the tension between belief, identity, and doubt. This wasn't simply about whether Elvis was still alive. It was about what happens when a carefully built mystery collides with reality in front of millions. Why people think Bob Joyce is Elvis. Before Bob Joyce became the center of one of the internet's strangest Elvis Presley theories, he was known primarily as a pastor and singer. But as recordings of his performances began circulating online, viewers noticed something they found difficult to ignore. His deep voice, facial structure, mannerisms, and even the way he performed certain songs reminded some listeners of Elvis. What started as scattered comparisons soon developed into a much larger mystery. The fascination grew because Elvis Presley's death had already inspired decades of conspiracy theories. Since August 1977, countless alleged sightings, disputed photographs, and claims that the king had secretly survived had kept the idea alive. Most of those stories eventually disappeared, but Bob Joyce gave believers something different. A living person they could continuously study, compare, and analyze. Online communities began placing photographs of Joyce beside images of an older Elvis, looking for similarities in the eyes, nose, jawline, ears, and smile. Others focused on his singing voice, slowing down recordings, or comparing individual notes with Elvis performances. Some even examined his hands, posture, movements, and supposed physical marks, arguing that the similarities went beyond coincidence. But the comparisons also produced obvious questions. If Joyce really had some connection to Elvis, why would he live publicly rather than disappear completely? Why become a pastor and continue appearing in photographs and videos where millions of people could examine him? And perhaps most importantly, what had Bob Joyce himself actually said about the growing theory? That last question became especially important because Joyce did not appear to build his public identity around claiming to be Elvis. Much of the speculation came from people watching him rather than from a direct declaration by Joyce himself. Yet every new performance, photograph, or interview seemed to give believers another detail to investigate. There were also problems with the theory that skeptics repeatedly pointed out. Dates, biographical details, age differences, and the enormous logistical challenge of Elvis secretly surviving his reported death all had to be explained. For believers, however, those contradictions often became part of the mystery rather than the end of it. Missing information was treated as evidence of secrecy, while similarities were presented as clues. Soon, the question was no longer simply whether Bob Joyce looked or sounded like Elvis. People wanted to know why so many details appeared to line up, why the comparisons continued spreading, and whether there was anything behind the theory that could withstand serious scrutiny. That is where the story becomes more complicated. Because once the photographs, voices, timelines, and public records are examined together, some details appear far less mysterious than they first seem, while others are exactly what kept the speculation alive. And eventually, all of those comparisons lead back to the one question Bob Joyce could never completely escape. Why did so many people become convinced they were looking at Elvis Presley? Building the Elvis myth. Bob Joyce did not just suddenly appear in the spotlight, more like he slid in quietly and steadily, like a person slowly coming into focus from the mist. He wasn't exactly a celebrity or some loud personality hunting for fame. Rather, he was a man with a theory that, somehow, grabbed the internet's attention. His idea looked almost simple at first glance. Elvis Presley never died in 1977. Instead, the famed musician supposedly faked his death and then decided to stay in a secretive, tucked-away life, as in out of sight. To back this radical claim, Joyce kind of presented a pile of details, not just one thing. Photographs examined closely, frame by frame, then timelines of sightings, and also physical comparisons. He pointed to birthmarks, little mannerisms, and voice patterns that, according to him, matched Elvis in ways that felt way too specific to be just coincidence. Like every piece was gathered carefully, so the whole thing could stitch together a story so detailed that a lot of people found it compelling, even if only partially. His presentation wasn't casual, and it wasn't ironic either. It came out with absolute conviction. Joyce didn't wink at the camera, and he didn't act like he was spinning a tale for entertainment. Instead, you could feel a deep belief in what he was saying, and that belief pulled in a devoted following. These followers weren't sitting there like passive observers, no. They chipped in, adding evidence, arguing theories, and defending the whole narrative when skeptics showed up. And the appeal of this myth didn't stop at simple curiosity. It hit something bigger inside people, a longing for magic, for some kind of escape. Mortality is heavy, you know, and the idea that Elvis, the greatest rock and roll icon, had transcended death, that stirred hope in those who couldn't really stand an ordinary ending to greatness. Joyce's narrative offered mystery and wonder, and that's the kind of thing many wanted to accept, regardless of facts. Of course, this following came with its opposite: skeptics and critics who saw Joyce's theory as nothing more than fantasy, and, well, kinda exaggerated. Scientists and fact-checkers pointed out inconsistencies, pulled up official death records, and argued about how easily images could be bent or edited. In their view, Joyce was treated more like a punchline than a serious claimant, and that really messed with his public image in a big way. Still, even with the ridicule, Joyce pushed on, defending his theory with a kind of lawyer-like precision, but also with believer-like fire. He didn't just build a theory, he built a public identity around it. So for him and his followers, the whole story stopped being only about Elvis. It became this shared conviction about something extraordinary sitting under the official version, quietly waiting there. That mixing of myth and identity made a tangled web, a narrative ecosystem where the theory and the man were basically inseparable. But belief alone rarely drags a story all the way into the public spotlight without pushback. Soon, a moment was coming when Joyce would have to answer more than what he believed. He'd have to face who he really was. Underneath the myth, no room for the shine. When belief begins to intertwine with identity, the lines between truth and hope can blur in ways that are hard to unravel. The line between belief and doubt. Behind every strong belief lies a silent tension between conviction and uncertainty. And Bob Joyce's story laid bare this fragile balance. In that pivotal live interview, something shifted. Not in the words he spoke, but in the silences between them. Those pauses revealed a man caught between defending a narrative and confronting the shadows of doubt within himself. Joyce didn't crumble under pressure. Instead, he hesitated, his polished facade flickering just long enough for the audience to glimpse the conflict inside. His initial response, "That's a question I've asked myself," was quieter and less rehearsed than anything he had said before. It signaled a crack in the armor, the admission that doubt was a part of his journey, however unwillingly. For Joyce, the theory had evolved beyond a mere hypothesis. It had become entwined with his identity and sense of purpose. Research that began as a quest for truth gradually blurred into a personal exploration. The distinction between seeking proof of Elvis's survival and seeking meaning in his own life became nearly impossible to separate. His belief was no longer just about evidence, but about who he was. The host's patient silence allowed this moment to linger, emphasizing its weight. Joyce's vulnerability was not met with immediate challenge, but with quiet observation. The camera caught every subtle gesture, his hand to his chest, the tight grip on the chair, the averted gaze, that spoke volumes about his inner turmoil. These were signs of a man wrestling with more than public opinion. Later in the interview, Joyce reaffirmed his evidential points, but it was clear that this return was less passionate and more mechanical. It felt rehearsed, as if he was seeking refuge in the familiar rather than embracing his own uncertainty. This retreat suggested a deep fear of losing not just the theory, but the identity it had forged for him. Then came the crucial question. If presented with definitive proof that Elvis really did die in 1977 as reported, would Joyce accept it? His slow, hesitant answer hinted at the deeper truth. His belief had become less about tentative investigation and more about faith or necessity. He seemed unable to imagine a life without this narrative, revealing how deeply he had invested himself in it. This tension between belief and doubt is the human story beneath all theories, the struggle to hold on to meaning even when confronted by uncertainty. Bob Joyce's moment on live television was a rare glimpse into that struggle, showing that sometimes the biggest question isn't about facts, but about who we really are behind the narratives we tell ourselves. The stories we tell often reveal more about our own journey than the realities they claim to explain. Public reaction and backlash. The moment Bob Joyce hesitated under that live studio spotlight did more than reveal his personal struggle. It sparked a wave of reaction from viewers, skeptics, and followers alike. For some, his visible doubt confirmed their suspicions that his entire theory was a facade. They saw his hesitation as proof that beneath the elaborate claims lay uncertainty or even deception. Social media ignited quickly, with clips of the confrontation spreading like wildfire, inviting mockery and harsh judgment. Skeptics pounced on any inconsistencies in Joyce's story, armed with official death certificates, autopsy reports, and expert analyses. They pointed out how facial comparisons could be manipulated by angles and lighting, and how timelines of sightings lacked solid verification. To these critics, the entire narrative was a house built on sand, vulnerable to the slightest truth. Joyce's moment of doubt added fuel to their argument. He was seen less as a truth seeker and more as a man caught in his own web of fantasy. But it wasn't only ridicule that followed. Joyce also retained a devoted group of believers who found his vulnerability relatable and even strengthening. For them, the moment showed a human side, a man bearing the weight of knowing a hidden truth or bearing the burden of extraordinary knowledge. Some saw his hesitation not as weakness, but as the mark of someone wrestling with a secret too heavy to carry easily. This dichotomy of responses deepened the divide between believers and skeptics, each interpreting the same moment in wildly different ways. The backlash wasn't limited to public opinion. It affected Joyce's public standing and future appearances. Where once he might have held a firm platform, the crack in his armor introduced doubt about his reliability. Critics used the interview as a case study for how conspiracy theories can blur reality, suggesting that Joyce had crossed from genuine belief into performative storytelling. Meanwhile, supporters doubled down, sharing his videos and defending his integrity passionately, motivated by loyalty or hope. This polarization illustrates how belief and doubt can coexist within communities, reflecting a broader cultural battle over truth and narrative. Joyce became a lightning rod, embodying the tensions between skepticism and faith, between evidence and emotion. The discussion moved quickly beyond the man himself to what his story represented: the desire to find meaning amid uncertainty, and the frustration when facts don't align with belief. As the internet churned with speculation and argument, Joyce's predicament became a mirror for many viewers grappling with their own doubts and convictions. His public hesitation was more than a single moment. It became a symbol of the messy, uncertain process of how we handle truth, identity, and hope. People on both sides were forced to reckon with what it means to trust, to doubt, and sometimes to choose one over the other. Most importantly, this backlash underscored that in the realm of conspiracy and myth, the messenger is as scrutinized as the message. The more Joyce embodied the story, the more his personal faith, or lack thereof, affected how the theory was received. This made the live interview a pivotal moment, not only for his narrative, but for the many who followed him, believed him, or dismissed him outright. Ultimately, the public reaction to Bob Joyce's live interview showed that one moment of vulnerability could ripple far beyond a single man. It highlighted the complex dance between belief and criticism that defines our relationship with stories that challenge official truths. Sometimes, the most revealing stories are not just about the stories themselves, but about the people who live them so intensely they become inseparable from their claims. The role of identity in conspiracy. Bob Joyce's story reveals how a theory can become more than an idea. It can evolve into a personal identity that shapes someone's entire worldview. Over time, the claim that Elvis Presley never died wasn't just a theory Joyce shared, it became a defining part of who he was. This deep identification can create a powerful resistance to doubt or challenge, because rejecting the theory might feel like losing a part of oneself. For many invested in conspiracy narratives, the line between belief and identity becomes blurred. They aren't simply endorsing an idea. They're embracing a community, a purpose, and often a sense of significance that ordinary life may not provide. Joyce's followers weren't casual onlookers. They were committed participants who saw the theory as a lens for understanding mystery and resisting the finality of death. This intertwining of belief and identity can make questioning the theory feel threatening, not just intellectually, but emotionally. Joyce's hesitation on live TV was a rare crack in the armor of certainty, exposing the inner conflict that happens when the story you tell yourself is tied to your very sense of meaning. The phrase he uttered about the research shifting from Elvis to himself speaks volumes about this transformation. When beliefs become identity, they also become harder to change or abandon. Joyce's response to the question about accepting definitive proof of Elvis's death, hesitating and hedging rather than accepting outright, showed how deeply he had invested emotionally. Discrediting the theory risked discrediting himself, making the truth a more complicated notion than facts alone might suggest. This phenomenon is not unique to Joyce. Many conspiracy theorists experience a similar fusion of self and story, which can explain why evidence sometimes fails to convince or even causes stronger defenses. The theory becomes a psychological refuge, a way to find meaning amid chaos, and a shield against confronting realities that feel unbearable or insignificant. Moreover, Joyce's identity as the man who knows the truth brought him a form of community and status, especially online, where followers rallied around him. This social reinforcement can deepen commitment, making it harder to step away even when doubts arise. The very act of publicly defending the theory builds a persona that becomes self-sustaining, regardless of any outside criticism. The stories we embrace can become the very fabric of our identity, making the journey to truth as much about self-discovery as about facts. What this moment means for us. Bob Joyce's live television moment goes beyond Elvis Presley or some conspiracy theory thing. It sort of points at something deeply human, that tug with belief, who we are, and what everything means. When a person who looked confident suddenly shows doubt, it makes you ask more than, is Elvis really alive? It's more like why folks want to latch on to these extraordinary stories in the first place. In a world that keeps handing you facts and information, alternative narratives can still stay strong because they hook into emotions. Joyce's moment seems to show that belief can offer mystery, or hope, or even a feeling of purpose, even when solid evidence is missing. His own vulnerability felt like a reminder that beliefs aren't always assembled only from facts. Sometimes they are woven into emotional needs and into that quiet wish that life contains something beyond the ordinary. And yeah, the interview didn't just stop with him. It also had an effect on the people who watched and followed the story. Some may take his hesitation as proof, like he's hiding something. Others might start questioning what they had already believed. That, right there, is why challenging beliefs that are really embedded can be so hard. Once a story starts living inside someone's identity or their community, dropping it can feel personal, almost like a small loss you didn't agree to. Joyce's moment also seems to show how people, pretty much everyone, makes little stories about themselves and the whole world. We end up forming beliefs about who we are, what makes life feel significant, and what the future may hold. And when those beliefs get tugged, when they are challenged, that doubt can wobble even the ideas we once treated as solid, like they could not be moved. In the end, Joyce's television appearance counts for more than just a back and forth about Elvis. It gives a look into how belief works, especially when certainty starts to crack. Whether viewers take up the theory or just push it away, the deeper issue stays there. Why do we pick certain stories, and what do these stories do for us? Bob Joyce's moment of doubt cracked open a story that goes far beyond Elvis Presley. It reveals the fragile boundary between belief and identity. His live interview invites us to reflect on why we hold certain truths and what they mean to us personally. If you found this insight compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more thoughtful stories about the people and ideas that shape our world.